could you just like start painting the picture of what the actual user experience is going to be like in the world of Web5? Like, how are people actually interacting with this thing? How much has the outside world changed as a result? I mean, I would assume this is going to affect everything, right? Like the 9 to 5 job and probably institutional realities, et cetera. Like, what does that world actually look like?
Well, we could probably talk forever about that, but I can give you a little bit of the vision that I have for what Web5 will look like. Have you ever used Tor, the Tor
Yeah.
browser?
Yeah.
I imagine that interfacing with this internet on Bitcoin, all of the Bitcoin nodes connected to each other, it would function very much like Tor. It would be a separate browser. And if we agree that the central bank digital currency is coming and they're going to force everyone to pay for their internet service with a facial scan or something of that nature, fingerprint, the access to the internet will be very controlled. And even harder for the average person to interface with than it is today. It may be more expensive. There may be more restrictions placed on it. You've posted too many times today, right? You can use AI, but only if it has this much hash power. If it's over this much hash power, that's too strong of an AI for you to use. All these control mechanisms placed into the internet. And we see that. We see that there are laws coming about that will restrict our access. And so with Web5, it would be truly a new internet. It would be compatible with the old one where I could still visit my old websites, but there would be new protocols baked into the browser. And for those who are listening who are technical, one of the goals is to get rid of the DNS. The DNS, the domain name service, is the great bottleneck of the internet. You have to register your domain with the third party that you don't have any control over. You don't actually own that domain. After a year, it goes back to the company, right? And the DNS is a collection of servers around the world. It's extremely centralized. And so how can we decentralize that part of the internet? It will be by using another web browser, another wallet to hold these identity verification tokens, verifiable credentials, things of that nature. There aren't any tokens that I'm aware of on Web5, whether it be Ethereum or other cryptocurrencies. Bitcoin really is the money of the internet for Web5. And that it solves every issue that we need. And to speak on that even more, I'm not necessarily a Bitcoin maximalist in the sense where I think Bitcoin is somehow different than cryptocurrency. It's all protected by cryptography, right? I do believe that Bitcoin is unique in that it has a network that we can build on that no other coin or technology has. It has a physical network that's sufficiently decentralized where if we were able to connect the nodes, we actually have a chance at building this new internet. And that is the value that I think that Bitcoin brings. And that's why I believe that Bitcoin will take all the functionality of every different type of technology that we've seen in Web3 and bring it to Bitcoin. Well, kind of like Bitcoin's at a poker table and just taking all the chips and taking the jackpot onto its side of the table. I believe that whatever functionality you would like to see, whether it's file storage, whether it's DeFi, things of that nature, it will happen node to node, peer to peer on Bitcoin, the network. And Bitcoin, for that reason, will become infinitely more valuable than it is today.
And what does that do then to traditional finance? Like, does this really just start to eclipse all of these legacy institutions?
I mean, I think in a free market, you have many different forms of currency.
Okay.
I mean, very early on in America, we had 800 different currencies, and one of them won. If Bitcoin was the only currency, that would be very centralized. That'd be concerning to me. If Bitcoin was the money for the internet, that is a right place for Bitcoin. Bitcoin was designed for the internet, from the internet, right? And so Bitcoin does really well in that sense. I think we'll still have gold and silver. We'll still have money. I think the banks will end up running nodes, right? If your node becomes extremely valuable, you'll probably want to keep your node in a vault. There's a lot of bank vaults out there. There's a lot of safety deposit boxes out there. This very well could be how people are able to add additional security to their digital footprint on Bitcoin.
Interesting. So what do, like, we're accustomed to the application layer in Web3 as being websites mostly.
Right.
I guess apps too are now part of that.
Yep.
What does the web app ecosystem look like in Web5? Is it different than what we're accustomed to now?
It is very different. Yes. So rather than having a centralized server that hosts a website and you visit it on your computer, you would run apps on your Bitcoin node. And other people who are running similar apps will be able to communicate through these apps while still retaining ownership of your data. The other thing is there are some companies out there, I won't say the name, they've done a really good job at making their app store a walled garden. You have to submit all kinds of applications and they take 30% of whatever value takes place over your app, right? That is a problem of centralization. And with a decentralized application layer on Bitcoin, you can create your own app, put it onto your node, and then share that app with anybody else who would like to run it. And now you have an application layer that is fair, equitable. It's no longer a server-client relationship where there's some really powerful computer and you're just there with a laptop and that computer is running 5 times faster than you are. And it's running all kinds of analytics. It's running all kinds of surveillance technology to extract as much data from you as possible. Now, you and I can use an app and share videos with each other over Web5, and it's private and secure. There is no centralized location that we have to refer to in order to use these decentralized apps. That is something I'm very excited about because in Web3, we do have decentralized apps, but almost always they still rely on Web2 architecture. There's still some server and some DNS link, some domain name that is involved in all of this, and it creates a Achilles heel for these apps. One of the things that Bitcoin will change with Web5 is instead of us accessing apps that hold our data that is held on a third-party server, we will run our own apps that hold our data on our Bitcoin node, increasing the value of your Bitcoin node. Another part of this is tying your data to the Bitcoin blockchain. Right now, we have a way of doing that I'm not extremely fond of with ordinals, but I believe that the concept is sound as far as Bitcoin is a really great time chain. If you have a child, you know which block that child was born in. That's a really great birth certificate, right? That you can have verifiable events that take place, and as long as you're not gumming up the blockchain with unnecessary transactions, I think it's a fantastic idea to be able to hold that data on your node, tied to a point in time on chain that everyone can verify. It's one of the reasons why you would want your Bitcoin node running at all times, so you can present the verification at all times. And also, I know that TBD, Jack Dorsey's company, is building applications that are serverless. And I'll leave that on the table now because they're doing some great work there. And anyone who's technical, you can dig into the weeds on that. There's some exciting stuff. There are other organizations too. Nostr is a protocol that is taking on some of these functionalities. And we can see a clear view of how a new web can be born just from the Nostr protocols. There's Fediverse, the Fedi Bravo app, and the Fedi communities. Incredible. Research those. There's all kinds of technology being built right now that do these things, and we're not sure which one is going to win. But we know that we won't be able to escape the walled gardens unless we have decentralized apps.
Interesting. So it's no longer, you're not interacting with an app that is sent from the top down, but everyone's just sort of choosing to run their own apps and then networking together mesh style.
That's
Basically.
right. The mesh is not always necessary.
Yeah.
If you're using, your fiber connection, that's
Mhm.
fine. The important thing is that if that connection were to go down for whatever reason,
Mhm.
that you're still able to communicate.
Mm.
We don't need everything to run through mesh networks all the time exclusively, but we have to have the ability to stay connected when those centralized providers fail.
Yeah, networks need to be robust for sure. So there's this quote, something like the future's already here, it's just not evenly distributed yet.
That's a great quote.
And you just said something offline that triggered that for me, is that this technology that we're talking about already exists. It's just not deployed yet
Yeah.
for the most part. And then you said something else too that I want you to elaborate on if you could, that in this Web5 vision, that network participants, us, actually become the internet.
That's right.
Could you expand upon that too?
So right now on the internet, I can own a laptop and I can browse the internet, which is transmission lines owned by somebody else. And I can access websites that are hosted on servers that somebody else owns. And I even have a cloud that holds all my data that is basically just someone else's computer. And so with Web5, the revolutionary thing is that all of those things come home. I own the hardware, I own the software and the data with no user agreements. Bitcoin was open source, is open source. And Web5 will also be open source. It's a very big component into this ecosystem because without ownership, you really don't have identity. And that's one of the benefits to actually owning the hardware. A lot of people would say, well, the internet works well. Why do I need to own the Starlink, connection? Why do I need to own the transmission lines? And I would say that it's important to own that because then you have an internet that can't go down. One example is we actually make a mobile Bitcoin node. It's a lunchbox that houses a Bitcoin node and a private cloud with movies, chat communication. It's basically Dropbox plus a Zoom in one. And it also has mesh networking devices that allow you to communicate off grid. And so really this becoming the internet, you can actually own the infrastructure and connect to other people who own their infrastructure. And now you're truly sovereign digitally.
Wow. So that's interesting because obviously we talk a lot about private property and Bitcoin being the ultimate form of private property. But it sounds like that is the theme again here, is that it's not just enabling people to own their purchasing power in a way that can't be inflated away or confiscated, but now it's enabling this internet paradigm where people own the whole stack,
Exactly.
hardware, software, data. Does this then resolve a lot of the issues in Web3, like with censorship and
Absolutely.
exploitation by social media business models and things like that?
Yeah, and even a lot of the issues with Bitcoin, when we look at scaling solutions, privacy, anonymity, when we look at getting your funds back if you lose certain credentials with your wallet. Fedi is a great example of this. If anyone who's listening isn't aware of Fedi, there is a monumental shift happening in Bitcoin with Fedi and the Fedi Bravo app. It's incredible. You run your own server for your community. It takes 4 people to run basically a Bitcoin node, and it produces a form of eCash that can be sent peer-to-peer offline. And that is one of the ways that we can incentivize the building of this new internet called Web5, is Bitcoin allows us to have Web5. Before, it was impossible. Every other token that comes out, it may have some good functionality, but Bitcoin actually gives us the ability to own our data, the hardware, the software, and connect to each other over an internet that's truly decentralized. And to speak on that even further, the Bitcoin blockchain is the ultimate DNS holder. If we replaced the DNS, we would replace it with decentralized identifiers on the Bitcoin blockchain. And it wouldn't be something that spams the network. You can have 10,000 verifications happening with one transaction. And then with eCash, you can actually have data paired with Satoshis, and you can have unique transmitting abilities that are outside the bounds of Lightning or Bitcoin. So all of this is a reality. It's not something that is far-fetched. People are working on the technology today, and it's just not realized. There's not huge marketing departments, as I said. There's not millions of dollars being pumped into user interface. So these things take a little bit more time to adopt, but it's necessary, and that's why people adopt it. People adopted Bitcoin when it was hard to use because it was necessary. And I believe Web5 will be the same. When the internet goes down and we can all still text each other, everyone's going to want that, no matter how inconvenient it may seem at first.
Yeah, definitely. Necessity is the mother of invention, something like that, right? That people don't.
Yes. Yeah.
Also, I guess for the adoption of inventions, that people don't adopt it until they feel the pain, right? Until the necessity's there. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, click here to find more just like it, and here to find our most recent episode. Also, make sure to like this video to help shine light on the corruption of money, and be sure to subscribe to this channel to stay connected.